Today's episode is brought to you by Roosters, a Noble Grill in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They provide an upscale menu of Southern food and dishes with international influences made from local ingredients. More info on them at the end of the episode.
Welcome to the Semmax Way, the definitive podcast for mastering finance, investment, and retirement planning. Prepare to unlock the secrets to financial success as we delve into lucrative investment strategies and provide expert guidance towards a secure retirement. With over 20 years of experience, Semmax Financial Group has been dedicated to serving investors, and through this podcast, we aim to empower you with the knowledge to maximize your savings and achieve lasting financial freedom the Semmax way. Whether you're a professional finance enthusiast, a high net worth individual, or part of a sophisticated investment group, this podcast is tailor-made for you. And now, here is your host, Matt Landon, financial advisor for Semmax Financial Group and licensed CFP.
Hello and welcome. Today we are going to talk about budgeting. I am joined by Mr. Jordan Schinsky in our office. He is another CFP. And so, Jordan, let's get the conversation going. First of all, are you a fan of budgeting at all? Do you feel like it's even necessary, or what's your opinion?
I do. I do believe that it's important. A lot of people look at budgeting as, why is it necessary for me? And looking at it from a very fundamental level. Mm-hmm. If I'm within my working years, I am receiving a paycheck every 2 weeks, twice a month, once a month, whatever it is. And I find myself having excess cash at the end of the month. Why do I need a budget? Right. Oftentimes there is a life event that occurs. There is a, so to speak, an awakening of someone saying, well, I'm 5 years from retirement. I should probably really buckle down to see if I have what I need.
Well, let me play devil's advocate for a minute here, because sure. I actually agree with you. I think a budget is important. I think metrics and being able to track things are helpful, but I can also understand the perspective and go, well, wait a minute, you already said it. I've got the income coming in that I need. I swipe that debit card. It doesn't get declined at the end of the month. Clearly, I don't have an issue. Why do I need a budget?
Okay. So here's a perfect example of why we need to. Think of it this way. We do spring cleaning in our house, right?
Correct.
Okay. Every spring or you take a point in time throughout the year and you say, I've got to clean out that closet. I've got to go up and look through my attic, or I got to tidy up my garage. Your finances are the same thing. Your budget is the same thing. Maybe you have a Pandora fee that you're paying every month for that you haven't used that app for a year. Why are you still paying that? Budgeting can identify that. If you break down all of your expenses, you can clean up unnecessary expense and free up more money for yourself. So it's just about keeping your house in order.
I would agree with that. I would also say when it comes to budgeting, I think what gets tracked gets when you're tracking something, you're paying attention to it. Mm-hmm. And so if you are somebody who has maybe unhealthy spending habits or an unhealthy relationship with money, doing a detailed budget and being very diligent and updating it. And we can talk about tools and different ways to budget, and we'll break down some of the figures. But I think in general, it's like when you put an emphasis on it, it can alter your behavior. Right. So it's like when you're observing it, it's going to be tracked. If I know that every week we're going to come in and on Monday morning at staff meeting, I've set this goal of I'm going to lose a certain amount of weight. And every Monday we come in, we put a big fanfare and I step on the scale and I know it's coming. Mm-hmm. That's really going to encourage me to actually do something about it. One, there's social pressure. Right. Yeah. Yep. But then also there's the knowledge of knowing when I step on that scale, it's not going to lie. It's going to say if I've lost weight, gained weight, stayed the same. Yeah. So it's when it's tracked, it's measurable. You see it over time. And so to that point on the social pressure side, I do think you've got to be on the same page with your spouse. Yep. You know, if you're a married couple and you're sharing your finances, you're in it together, you got to be on the same page.
You're hitting a lot of the points that are really important that I really want to address. Okay. So one of the things that you did hit was that what is the incentive, right? Okay. If you have the right incentive, a lot of times, and I will use this, the struggles with budgeting are very similar to putting a plan in place to work out, to go to the gym every week, to get my body in shape, or dieting. Hey, I want to lose 25 pounds. I'm going to go on a diet. Why do those parts of our lives, why do those strategies more often than not fail for us? Because we don't have enough incentive. Okay. Right. We know if I go to the doctor and he tells me, dude, you got to lose 25 pounds. Okay. I need a budget. Or I'm sorry, I need a budget. I need to go on a diet, right? After 2 or 3 weeks, if I don't see the results that I want, okay, what happens? I drop off my diet. I don't stick to it, right? And I'm right back to where I was. Budgeting is no different. Sometimes the understanding of what is perceived to be the importance of doing it is not enough to keep you on that track. You have to find something additional that is going to motivate you through the long term of implementing not just a plan, but these types of strategies need to become a lifestyle change.
And I will say this, I think you're right on the lifestyle change, but I'm gonna point out one thing when it comes to budgeting. I think so many times we have this negative connotation of budgeting because we're thinking about it as restrictive. We're thinking about it as you can only spend this much. You can only do this. It's like, it's very rigid. It's very strict. I don't think you have to be so detailed to say you can only spend $62 at the grocery store. It's like, now it may be, you might have that kind of a strict, rigid budget. I don't think it has to necessarily be that strict. Mm-hmm. And the other side of that is, oftentimes when we think about it, we're thinking about people who need to cut down their spending. Mm-hmm. We're saying you need to be more responsible with your funds. It can go the other way. There are folks who are in a situation where you have ample assets, you have the ability to spend, but because you haven't done that budget, because you don't know, you're so fearful. Mm-hmm. You're going the other way. You're living off of $1,500 a month when really you could afford to be living off of $2,700 a month.
Yeah.
And you're scrimping and struggling unnecessarily. So I think with a budget, there are some restrictions, but there can also be freedom in it.
Yeah. Well, that's where your financial biases could really come into play, right? Some people have an addictive personality. And when they get into a situation where they say, I'm going to put myself into this budget and I'm going to clean everything up as much as possible. And they throw themselves in. They're all in on it, right? They're spreadsheeting, they're tracking stuff daily, they're pinching pennies and all this kind of stuff. That's not exactly healthy either. You use a budget as a tool to achieve a goal. Okay. If you allow yourself to kind of emotionally get into it, that to an extent it's healthy, but it also can be detrimental to that long-term goal at hand.
That can also
you can burn yourself out.
Yeah, I was going to say when you do that to such a regimented degree where you pull out every receipt and you're putting everything into an Excel spreadsheet, if it's not easy and if it's not consistently repeatable, you're going to get burnt out. You're not going to keep doing it.
So there's a balance. Most of the time, though, people more often than not don't stick to a plan, and that's where you find people to say, "Hey, I need to free up $100 a month, or I need to increase my saving for retirement. I got 2 10-year-old kids that I got to put through college in 8 years. I got to start putting away for college, whatever that event may be. If you don't oftentimes see the results quickly enough, if you get thrown off as a distraction, and I'll use this as an example. Okay. When you get into budgeting and hey, I've done it 3 months in a row. I'm feeling pretty good about it. All of a sudden, I've got my car insurance that I only pay twice a year shows up. And I got $600 I got to pay out. And I'm like, well, there goes this month's budget because I got to pay this, twice a year fee that is throwing it all off. So I'll just get back to it next month.
But you can also, when you're putting together your budget, that's where you do need to look at what are my weekly expenses, what are my monthly expenses, bi-monthly, what are my semi-annual or once a year kind of things that come
Write
up.
them down.
Yep. Write them down and start putting towards it. So whether it is that car insurance every 6 months or the fact that you will eventually need new tires, it's like if you're putting that into your budget and you're saying, well, I don't need new tires now, but I'm going to go ahead and put $70 towards car maintenance.
Yeah.
And you just keep shoving it aside. And you've got kind of that line item. So instead of your general savings account having this big amount in it and it's just this nebulous amount, if okay, maybe it's one savings account. Let's say there is $10,000 in there, but $2,000 is allocated towards your vacation. And $1,000 is allocated towards your emergency account. And right now there's $800 towards auto repairs. Then when something comes up, when that auto repair shows up, you pull that $800 out. You're not sitting here going, I ruined everything. I took it out of my savings account. Now I only have $9,200. You're going, well, no, all of my balances are the same, but my car allowance balance, that's now at zero. Right. It was like because you're able to build it back up, but you're realizing those monies were allocated towards that thing. You kind of planned on it ahead of time.
And it doesn't throw you off as much because, yes, this was prepared for.
So I think we're on the same page when it comes to having a budget is a really powerful tool. It's beneficial. It's something you can use.
Yeah.
But I think there's an aspect of it, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording. We were just kind of chit-chatting around things. And there's this principle that is a beautiful principle. There's a book that I read called Profit First. Okay. And the idea behind this is that whether you are a household and you're bringing in money, whether you are a business, anything else, you should really be paying yourself first. And it's not a brand new concept, but I think it gets overlooked a lot. And it actually is not as hard as you would think, because when we say profit first, if you bring in a certain amount of money, well, we know you want to put a certain amount in savings.
Right.
Now that amount can vary. We've got different rules, and we can kind of talk about the 50, 30, 20 rule and variations on that. We'll dive into that here in a minute. But I think the principal thing here is you want to start with that profit first. You want to pay yourself first. You want to put that savings aside. And the easiest way to do that, we're doing it intuitively, is around 401k plans.
Right.
Right. So let's talk about that for a moment. So how does that make it easy to pay yourself first?
It's on autopilot. It comes out of your check every month. You don't have to physically do the transaction. It's automatically done for you. And then that match, whatever your employer is contributing, goes into it as well. But when it's done out of sight, out of mind, it's not something that you think about every day. It's not, oh man, I got to do that transfer to my savings account today. I'll do it tomorrow. It automatically takes care of it. And as long as you understand as far as the achievement of your goal, do I need to save 10% a year? Do I need to save 15% a year? And you need to have a conversation with your advisor about that, because identifying what that goal is, what your time frame is, and how much you need to achieve will change those numbers. But once you've established what that amount is, and you put that into play, now all of a sudden, like I said, you put it on autopilot. So that's a great way of implementing a budget without having to manually think about it.
Yeah. And I think you touched on something really key in there, and we're going to have to circle back around to that, because when it comes to the impact of the advisor on your budget, well, all right, I'm saving 15% of my paycheck is going directly into my 401k. Great. Are we doing that pre-tax? Are we doing that post-tax? Is it better to be going into your 401k, or should you be funneling some of that money directly into a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA or a non-qualified account?
Yep.
I think it's really key to be having those conversations, because if you're wanting to retire at 57, okay, you're definitely going to be a principal person. You're going to have to be putting money aside. And there are ways to do that without having these massive penalties and paying exorbitant amounts in taxes.
Making sure it's all positioned properly.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But you got to put some forethought into it. Yeah. And that's where the advisor piece comes into play. So let's dive into a little bit of the tools. So I think we're in alignment from a philosophical standpoint. A budget makes sense.
Yeah.
Now the nuances of that budget and how to do it, we've talked about Excel spreadsheets. There's different apps. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. Here's my opinion, and you're welcome to weigh in, agree, disagree.
Sure.
But I think that whatever tools you implement, it needs to be something that is consistent and something that you're going to be able to stick with.
It has to be repeatable.
Absolutely.
And it has to fit your lifestyle. If you're technologically comfortable with things, and you pull up your bank app every day to see what your checking account is at, or you're taking pictures of your check to upload them online instead of walking in to talk to a teller, then yeah, maybe it's better for you to download an app to take advantage of that strategy of maintaining a budget. If you're a more conservative individual that says, I like to write paper checks and I like to keep my tax returns in paper in my safe at home, then maybe you should print out a spreadsheet and pen and paper it, hang it on your refrigerator. Well, keep it front of mind.
I also think having different accounts can be really helpful when you're budgeting. So if you actually, if I pull out my wallet right now, you're going to look at me and go, Matt, why do you have so many debit cards? And if you look at the back, one of them says family fund on it. One of them says bills on it. One of them says Matt there's different accounts, because the way my wife and I do it, we have a bills account, and all of those reoccurring bills that are coming out every month, we know we're going to have to pay the water bill. We know we're going to have to pay the electrical bill. That comes out of a specific account.
Yep.
Well, we have a separate account for our family fund, which is where you're going to pay your groceries, where you're going to get your gas from, things of that nature. And something that Kristen and I have built into our budget, this was one of the best pieces of advice I have ever gotten. It was in premarital counseling inside of this budget, because Kristen and I do combine our funds. So regardless of who made more this month or that month, it's we made this much. We're in it together.
Yeah.
Now, not everyone does it that way, but that's the way we do it.
Right.
Regardless of that, we each have an individual account, and that's our money.
Yep.
And that is so important. Now, it might be $5. If things are really tight, it might not be a huge amount. It might be $5 every 2 weeks where you go, you know what? This is money that I can do whatever I want with.
Yeah.
And Kristen gets the same. And the exact words in that our pastor used when he was talking to us about us, he said, I don't care if she wants to save that money for 6 months and then blow it all on getting a really nice manicure pedi done. And you can't look at her and go, we don't have the money for that, because she saved it. And if you want to take that $5 out every 2 weeks, cash it in quarters, and then sprinkle it around to watch people smile when they pick it up in the parking lot. He's like, you can do it. She can't say anything about it.
Yeah.
Literally, that's the example that he used. It was just like you're leaving $1 somewhere to put a smile on somebody's face. He was like, and you go, wait a minute, that's a waste of money. Well, it's my money. I can do what I want with it.
Right.
Right. So if you want to save it, great. If you want to spend it, great. But that's your money.
Yeah.
So that amount can change. It might be $5. Heck, it might be $500. I'm
And the
not
purpose
giving you a
could
dollar
change.
amount.
That may be my golf budget, right?
Exactly.
I mean, it could be anything.
Exactly.
But that's your money.
But that's your money.
Yeah.
And well, I'm not dipping in and affecting the family funds. But what's the amount that we can reasonably use?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love that as a tool, because also I can look and I can see that debit card. Well, if Matt's account goes to zero, guess what? I'm broke.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that there's $3,000 in the bills account. It doesn't matter that there's $1,800 in the family fund. I don't have any more money.
Yep.
And it's very visual. And so then if you say, hey, after this, let's go grab lunch. Let's go get some Mexican. I can't. I don't have any more discretionary money.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you
I'm
go,
out of my
"Wait a
budget."
minute.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. I know what you make. You're not broke. I'm not. But that's where the budgeting piece comes into play.
Yep.
When it comes to going out to eat money, I am broke.
It helps you maintain your responsibility and your commitment to it. I do a very similar strategy of what you had just mentioned. I use my credit card. Now, credit cards will get people into trouble. I don't oftentimes recommend this particular strategy unless you're already comfortable in a responsible approach to a credit card. I use my credit card for everything. Gas in my car, groceries at the store, all my utilities and stuff go on it. And the reason why is because it funnels it to a single location. I use the credit card because it creates an additional separation from my bank accounts. And then every month I pay off that credit card, but I look at it several times a week. And what I'm doing is I'm identifying, where am I at in my spend? For instance, for Christmas, I've never been on a cruise before. We're going to take the kids on a cruise over spring break.
You going to do any scuba diving?
I am indeed.
Yeah,
I got that booked. Yep.
Excellent. I know you're a diver and it's been a while. So.
Well, it has been. It's been about 2 years since I went diving.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited. I'm going to do a 2-tank dive. I'm going to do a Liberty ship, and we're going to do a wall dive in the Bahamas.
You're
excited.
You're going to have an amazing experience.
Right. But so when we booked that ended up hitting my credit card, and I just paid it this morning. We had been saving for the trip. We budgeted for it. When I saw it, I followed my credit card. I saw that it was on there. Of course, my credit card this month is going to be more than what my normal budget on my credit card is. But that's that type of annual planning that, okay, we know this is coming. I know it's there. It's already been budgeted for. I paid it, and then I'm moving on. Now it zeroes out, and I move on to the next month. But I look at it several times a week to identify, where am I at? I know where my practices are throughout the course of the month. Am I above budget? Am I behind budget? How comfortable am I? And that's what keeps me on track.
And when it comes to the credit card, that can be a really powerful tool, because you can get analytics, and it can show you how much did you spend eating out? How much did I spend on different things?
It can be broken down. And of course, then there's the whole rewards points and stuff like that. There may be a 5% bonus to it.
And if you're somebody that's interested in rewards hacking, there's all kinds of information out there. I will say Kristen went down that rabbit hole pretty heavily. So Kristen and I, we had a foreign exchange student who lived with us for a year. Her name's Liana. She's awesome. She's back home in Spain. Mm-hmm. Right. And so something that Kristen and I discussed was we wanted to be able to go and visit her, and we didn't want this to be a one-time thing. We wanted to be able to go and see her multiple times. Well, one of the most expensive parts is air
travel. Yeah.
So if you can get a credit card that gives you big reward miles and all of a sudden we're able to get that airfare covered. Well, once you got that box checked, well, then what we do is switch to using a credit card that's building up hotel points.
Yeah.
So once you get your airfare, once you get your hotel covered, let me tell you, a cappuccino is not that expensive when you're sitting in the streets of Barcelona. And so it's one of those things where if you're interested in traveling, there's ways to use this budget, maximize it, and then you save yourself a ton of money. You just got to put that emphasis on it.
Yep.
Right?
It identifies additional opportunities.
But I will also say this, it turned into a lot of work. And you got to stay on top of it, because then I'm calling Kristen going, wait a minute, I need to get gas. Do I use this debit card or do I use this credit card? And if we're using this credit card, how do we make sure the debit card matches up? And that goes back to the system.
Yeah.
You got to have tools in place, and you have to have a system that's easy to use. Well, if it's too complicated, you're not going to do it.
There's two things that I will say in response to that. Anything that's worth it should require dedication and should have a challenge that's associated with it. But the other aspect of it is that through repeated implementation, it gets easier.
100%.
It gets easier.
100%. Now, a couple months ago, this was prior to the new year, but a buddy of mine from church, we found out that we go to the same gym. Mm-hmm. Let me correct that. We found out that we both had a gym membership at the same gym. and
attendance is optional.
Exactly. They don't make you show up when you sign up, right? So what I realized is I was like, man, I need a gym buddy. And he said, me too. And so we made it a point to now we get together at the gym. So at 6:30 every morning, you're going to find me at the gym, because I know that my buddy is waiting on me. And he knows the same thing. If he shows up late, well, guess what? I'm sitting there texting him at 6:35 going, where are you at, bud? I'm already warming up. It's that accountability, right? But here's the thing. Neither one of us are really big into weightlifting. Neither one of us are huge, incredibly muscle bound guys, but we both wanted to get into better shape. And so the goal for the first month and a half, the first 6 weeks, was not to increase my lifts. It was not to do a specific set of exercises. Literally, my goal was to show up and spend 30 minutes in the weight room.
Yeah.
It was more important to show up. So when we show up one day, I'm like, man, I really don't feel good. I'm exhausted. I'm just going to sit here and do some stretching and do some core workout. Another day, you're hitting the weights really heavy. It was more about being there consistently.
Yep.
And when you show up consistently, that's where improvement happens. And then you start lifting, because I'm already here. I didn't want to come, but I said, I'm not even going to lift today. I'm just going to show up and meet him there. Well, you show up, and after 5 minutes, go, you know what? I'm here. I might as well lift some weights. You get done, you feel better, right?
Yeah.
James Clear, Atomic Habits, he talks about that. It's about building repeatable habits.
Yep.
Now,
it's empowering. It really is.
Here's the other thing about budgeting that I think is really unique and really cool. When you have that habit in place, when you have that automatically happen, you don't have to think about it as much, right? Because our circumstances dictate a lot of our responses.
Yeah.
Think about this. When you buy a brand new tube of toothpaste, how concerned are you with how much toothpaste you put on that thing?
You're not.
No, you just you put an inch long strip of toothpaste on that.
Half
on
it drops on the floor. You don't care, right?
Exactly. It's like your water pressure's too high. It goes shooting onto the sink. You're like, that's fine. We'll do it again, right? Just put another one on there. Brush your teeth. Go about your day. No worries. When you get down to like that last little bit of the roll, and you're like, I have got to buy toothpaste, but I keep forgetting.
Yep.
What do you do? What does the dentist recommend? Pea size.
Yeah, you're very deliberate.
You are. You put just what you need to put in there, and then the next day you're like, you know what? I forgot again. So what do? You do that roll. Some people do the scrape method. Some people do the roll method. You're squeezing
I'm gonna get every last ounce out of it.
That first half of that tube of toothpaste takes you a month to get through. That last inch of that tube of toothpaste can take you 5 weeks to get through, right? Why? There's scarcity.
Yeah.
When you have a ton, who cares? It's the same thing with contact solution. When I was filling up my contact solution, when you got that full bottle from Costco, buddy, just spray it in there. Mm-hmm. You get near the end of that bottle and you go, you know what? My contacts really only need about a centimeter. I don't need to fill this thing to the brim.
Yeah.
Right. You when you restrict that resource, it changes your behavior.
Yep. When
you restrict that resource with your budget, it changes your behavior.
It certainly does.
When you realize, oh, I'm looking at that personal account of mine. I've only got $5 here. I'm only going to spend $5.
Yep.
Or I'm going to go, is that where I want those $5 to go? If I've got $500 in there, well, who cares what the $5 goes to?
Yeah.
It's negligible.
Yep.
Right. And that's the one concern with credit cards. And that's where I think you really have to be diligent, because when they give you that $6,000 limit, and then 6 months later, they come back and go, hey, you deserve a raise. You get a $20,000 limit. Yeah. And you go, I can spend 20 grand.
Yeah.
So you don't have to tell me what the limit on your card is, but I'm sure you're not hitting it every month.
No.
Yeah.
And that is due to, you've got to be responsible with it.
Right.
And again, that's a financial practice that you got to be careful to make sure that it's implemented right before you use that strategy.
Yeah. So let's break down some of these numbers. We mentioned a 50, 30, 20 kind of rule of budgeting. Yep. That's a rule that I really like. It's not the only one out there, but let's walk through kind of this 50, 30, 20. What's the 50?
Right. So 50 is your essential spending. Okay. This is your non-discretionary. These are anything from your long-term debt that you have to pay, your mortgage, your car payment, your school loans. This is essentials like your groceries every week, your the gas in your vehicle to get you to and from work. This is everything that you cannot live without.
So these are your needs.
These are your needs.
These are your absolute needs.
Correct.
So that should be 50%.
Yep.
And this is and just as an aside here, this is very much so. This is very much so kind of the idealized budget. The reality is if you're not in that situation and it's much more tight for you, that might be 90%. Yeah. That might be where your situation is.
Yeah.
So you might be in a 95-5. You might be in a 30-30-30. It's like your personal situation could change. This is a really good rule of thumb if possible.
And I'll say this, throughout your financial lifespan, it is going to change. When you're early in your career and you may have assumed, I just purchased a house 2 years ago. I've got a mortgage. Well, when I'm 2 years from retirement and that mortgage is paid off, now my need is not as big because I'm not paying a $1,500 a month mortgage.
Right.
That money can be reallocated to either my wants or my savings.
So need should be 50%. These are the essentials, right? And then wants, that was what you mentioned next. So that 30% should be around wants. Now, what is the difference between a want and a need?
Well, some of that is within the eye of the beholder. Your wants are the discretionary spending. I look at this loosely as saying, my entertainment value, right? Taking my wife to go out and see a movie for a Saturday matinee.
Okay.
Going out to dinner, right? Those sort of things are your wants versus your needs.
And now I want to point out something here. So let's talk about NFL Sunday ticket.
Okay.
Is that a want or a need?
That is, again, this is the part where it gets a little gray area, because there are people who are going to say, I am not going to live without my football, or golfing is not a necessity in life, but there are plenty of people out there that are going to say,
what's the point of living if I can't golf?
Right. I am going to go out and play 18 holes every Sunday afternoon. And that's going to be a need, right?
Well, and I think it still qualifies under the wants tab, right? When we talk about needs, we really are talking about these are the things you have to survive.
Right.
This is keeping a roof over your head. This is keeping food in your belly, right?
Yes.
And not going out to Fleming's or Chili's every night, but keeping food in your belly, making sure the utilities are paid. Those are the necessities of life.
Yeah.
The wants, in my opinion, are the things that make life worth living.
Right.
So going golfing, watching football, those types of things. They're not a necessity. They're a want. And that's why we have it in the budget.
Correct.
Right. Because you have your needs, but then you also have your wants. And I think where people can kind of get confused and they go, well, wait a minute, my needs have really built up. And I go, well, is that a need or is a want? There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to be specific when you're putting this together.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a perfect example. I'm a big hockey fan. Love the Carolina Hurricanes.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, season tickets to the Carolina Hurricanes is absolutely a want of mine. That is not in my budget.
Okay.
Kristen and I talked about it. She had other wants, and then we had wants we both had, right? Well, that one didn't make the cut. Now, at some point, I would love for it to be in our budget. But right now, season tickets to the Hurricanes doesn't make sense. And part of it is because of the cost. And part of it is because I don't have the time to go to all the games.
Yeah.
So even if I had the tickets, I don't have the time. So I think when you're looking at this, even something like a gym membership, right? They will happily take your $40 a month or your $80 a month or
regardless of whether you're going every day or you haven't showed up in 3 months.
I'm going to call out Planet Fitness here just a little bit because Planet Fitness model is around $10 a month.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they've built their model around. But they do it in such a way that $10 a month is not going to make or break your budget. And you're not going to think about it. And they sell more memberships than they can possibly have guests come in because they don't actually want you coming in.
Yeah. They know you're not.
And they know you're not going to. So it was like that's an area that you could cut that out. Well, that's a want. Well, I want to go to the gym. Yeah, it's not a need. So that goes under the wants category.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got 50% for needs. You've got 30% for wants. And again, these are the things that make life worth living.
Yep.
What are we left with? We got 20% here.
Savings.
All right. Now, when you say savings, break that down for me. Does that mean 401k? Does it mean savings account at my bank? Does this mean money that I put underneath the pillow? When you say savings,
yes,
it's all of the above.
It's all of the above. Okay. And if you need to adjust that to be a higher percentage, then you adjust. You say, okay, maybe I need to reduce my wants to 25% and increase my savings to 25%. That 20%, that's where, again, this is important to have that conversation with your advisor. How much, this is the breakdown. How much do I need for identifying what are my goals? How much do I need to contribute to each one to achieve them? I'll use this example, right? Typically speaking, when you come out of school and you begin your professional career as a young adult, if you're contributing 10 to 12% to a retirement goal every year, more than likely you're going to achieve that goal over a 30, 35 year period of time. If I don't have that, if I don't start that, and I know at 45 years old that I have to begin, I may have to contribute 18% to that retirement plan, right? Well, then perhaps some of my other savings aren't going to be able to get contributed to. Now I need to make an adjustment to those potentially wants,
right?
So I can free up more money to save up for college for the kids.
And I would like to maybe change the title just a little bit from just savings.
Okay.
Let's think about it another way. You got to think about profit.
Yeah.
And you need to put profit first. We need to put savings first. I know we mentioned it last. It was the third thing we went over because I kind of went down, what's the 50, what's the 20, but really you need to put it first. And like we were talking around the 401k contributions, well, it's automatic. That comes first. You don't think about it. Think about yourself like a business. If you have really high revenue coming in, if you have great income coming in, but you're spending more than you're bringing in, your expenses are greater than your revenue, it doesn't matter how much you make.
Yeah.
You're going to feel broke.
Yep.
And you're going to be broke. And here's the reality. And I say this from years of working with folks. I have clients that are millionaires who never made more than $70,000 per year in their life.
Yep.
But they were very diligent with what they spent, what they saved, how they invested. It was something that was incredibly important to them. And I have folks that I've sat down with who make $300,000 a year and they have less than $100,000 saved for retirement. They're in their 50s.
Yeah.
Why? Because they've got a mortgage that is way over budget. They've got a lease on a car that 2 years later, they're going to flip it into a new lease. They have no value built up. And they're just, yes, you're making great income, but you're spending more than you're making.
Right.
You're going backwards.
Right.
And that's where that profit piece comes into play. That's why with that forced scarcity, when you pay yourself first, I think when we think savings, we think, oh, let's go over to the side. That's extra. Right? When you think profit, we all understand you have to have a profitable business in order for it to stay in business.
Yes.
Think of yourself as your own business. If you are the business owner of your own life, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's like you are the owner and the ultimate decider of how your life is going to go. You got to make sure you're giving yourself a profit. Give yourself a paycheck.
That's right. So really, when you break down those numbers, those needs, those necessities, whatever percentage that ends up falling out to, again, that benchmark of 50%, the first thing you need to do is identify what is going to help you achieve that goal. There's your profit center. That's where you're going to be trying to target. Everything else has to be adjusted to meet that expectation. Mm-hmm. So start there first.
I will also say, and this is just on the psychological side of things, delayed gratification. Right?
Yes.
Think about this. When did you first decide you're going on a cruise? Or wait, did you decide or who came up with this idea?
It was a joint venture with me and my wife. Okay. We kept it as a surprise from the kids.
But who first brought it up? Was it you or who was the one who said, "Hey, I think we should go on a cruise"?
I think I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you first started thinking about it and talking about it, how much time did you spend getting excited and talking about the opportunity and thinking about how excited the kids are going to be when you tell them? I mean, not even just going, but I mean, literally like when you tell them.
It's all part of the process. And
how much fun have you had?
It's been a blast so far. I mean, when we told the kids, and what's the first thing we did is we went on YouTube and found videos of the ship that we're going to be on and the destinations that we're going to. It was like, this is what we're going to do. And they were so excited. And that's gratifying for me. Right. Yeah. So, I mean,
so when you're spending that money, it's like leading up to it, all that anticipation, that's all part of the fun.
Yeah.
Right. It's not just if I told you tomorrow, hey, I'm not telling you what we're doing, but show up and pack a bag. And the next day, hey, we're going on a cruise. You're like, well, this is cool, but I wish my family was here, first of all. Yeah. And secondly, you're like, how much more awesome would it be if I told you a month ahead of time and you're getting excited and you're packing and you're thinking, well, do we need new swim trunks? And you know, like you're just, all of that goes into it. That's part of what makes it so amazing. It's that delayed gratification.
Yep.
But then once you do it, it's over. It's done. Right. And when you get a new car, you're so excited about your new car. You love your new car. Well, 3 years later, it's just a car. Right. I'm just driving to and from work and I'm thinking about the new one. Right. And so that's where something that Kristen and I did. And I'm not saying everyone should do it exactly the way we do it. Everyone has different personalities and our childhoods shape our perspective on money. Now, I grew up as a pastor's kid. We did not have a lot of money. Mm-hmm. And so for me, making sure that we are able to cover our bills was always really, really important to me. So just because the bank says you can afford to buy something doesn't mean you necessarily should. When we first got approved for a house, I looked at my budget, you know, what I was bringing in. I looked at Kristen, what she was bringing in. We looked at our budget together. And we went to the bank and we applied for, you know, approval to get a loan, you know, so we had that pre-approval letter. Then we can start house shopping. The value of the home that they said we could purchase, I looked at it. Kristen looked at me and she went, "Oh, I can start looking at better houses on Zillow." And I said, "You cut that number in half."
Yep.
Because when we went to the wants and the needs, could we technically afford it? Yes. Was that going to be significantly higher? The mortgage, if we went with what they approved us for at the time, the mortgage payment would have been almost 60% of our total budget.
What year was this?
This was 2000 and oh goodness, it's been a while. 2014.
Okay. I went through the exact same thing in 2007, right before the housing market collapsed. We bought our first home in Kernersville. Okay. I banked through Bank of America. So we walked in and we talked to a mortgage specialist there. And
in 2007, they would say, if you have a pulse and a W-2,
pulse optional, I swear. I mean, it was
working part-time. He was like, here's $900,000. Go buy a house.
Oh yeah. So my wife and I, we were both working, making about equal income. Our household budget was about $100,000 in income. They approved us for a $460,000 loan. Pre-approved us for a $460,000 mortgage. And they said, well, when the final approval comes in, it'll probably be higher. We walked out of there and my wife was like, we can start looking to live in Bermuda Run. I was like, no, we can't. I was like, you got to think about this. Do you want to be, and this is a phrase. Do you want to be house poor?
Yeah.
Do you want to be paying really your entire income to your house budget? You know, we talk about housing ratios, right?
Yeah.
So housing ratio 1, housing ratio 2. What is the amount of your housing expense to the overall budget? That percentage, right? That would, they were comfortable putting upwards of 60% of your income to a housing budget. That's what they were approving. And that is ridiculous.
That ideal, right? If we want 50% to be those needs, your mortgage probably shouldn't be more than 30.
No. Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think what the housing market, housing ratio wants 24%. When you take into account like all of your utilities and everything else that's associated with it, I think it's 32%. So you're pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the other thing here is we can get really, really granular, but the big picture, I think, is what's really key. Right. And that's also where talking to your advisor can be really helpful in these things, because particularly when we're talking about the budget, you know, when we're talking about that profit piece and you're saying, well, should I be putting more into my 401k, and should that be going pre-tax? Should it be going post-tax? I've got excess funds, you know, how much is sitting in my general savings account? What kind of interest rate is that making for me? Should I be more aggressive with those funds? Should I be more conservative? You know, it's like how to balance that. That's a conversation you should be having with your advisor.
Absolutely.
Right. I would also say just having a conversation around your budget in general. Like I said, some people have got that figured out. Some people don't.
Yeah.
This has been a little bit more of a general conversation, but I think this is a topic that is really, really powerful, particularly for younger folks to get a grasp on, because it can put you in a much better position. But at the same time, I'll say this, just because you're sitting there and you're going, wait a minute, I'm 55 and I'm just now getting a budget for the first time. Is it too late? No,
it's not.
Right. It's not too late. But the best time to do something, you know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Second best time today
is now. That's right.
You know, it's like, I think it's important that you take action and you move forward. And I hope folks are encouraged by that.
Yep.
Right. So key takeaways, all other things aside, and like break it down for me at the very end. If you were just going to say, what's the one thing people should take away from this?
Mindset. It's mindset. Okay. There are two different approaches to identifying the budget. That's your philosophy. Okay. And that's your personal approach to it. And then the analysis and the data and the numbers part. Okay. The first thing that anyone needs to do if they're going to implement a budget is be in the right mindset. That philosophy, that adjustment, that lifestyle change that puts it into a comfort zone in your day-to-day or month-to-month lifestyle. That's the biggest takeaway from this part of the conversation. We should, at some point in time, have a follow-up to this, talking about the other side of it, the analysis and the data.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably do a part 2 where we get into more of that. You know, I think that's a great idea. And so we'll do a follow-up episode on that. But I agree. I think mindset is so key, because your money can control you or you can control it. Right. Yep. But something's going to be in control. And I do think that when you have the right approach and the right philosophy, some of these nuanced tools, you'll realize, well, wait a minute, I'm already doing that. I'm kind of doing that intuitively. Oftentimes that comes from our childhood, our upbringing, you know, what people have poured into us, what we've learned and discovered on our own. But I think the important thing is to start.
Yep.
Right now, you don't just want to go charging headlong and sign up for a marathon and race it next week thinking I'm going to be fine. You told me I need to start running. Just do it. Right.
Yeah.
Maybe we start with a 5K, and maybe we start with a couch to 5K program where you walk and you only run for 30 seconds.
Yeah.
We will get you to that marathon. It won't be immediately. I would say if you're struggling with where to start with all of this, just start with sitting down and either looking over the numbers and just taking stock of where you are right now. And you can do that with your spouse. I think it's really important to do it with your spouse. Kristen and I, we do something every week. We do a marriage meeting. And it's a weekly marriage meeting, and we go over different things. And that sounds kind of silly. And you're like, well, wait a minute. Again, I'm not trying to say your life is a business. I'm not trying to say your marriage is a business. It's not. But a structured meeting where we have an agenda and we know what we're going to go over every week is really helpful. And it's that accountability piece. We're keeping each other accountable.
Yep.
And one thing I'll also say with that, finances can be very emotional. We look at it particularly as advisors, and we're going to do that part 2 where we get into the analytics and the data. But a lot of it is mindset, is emotion. It's about how do you feel about things. And so approaching things from a good place can be really helpful. And that's also where that third party sitting down with the advisor can be really helpful, because sometimes you're speaking one language, your wife is speaking a different language, and it's good to be able to kind of have that person kind of flows between and can help make sure things are smooth.
Well, I think it's important that you have a partner in the plan. Whether it's a buddy that you can budget with, say, hey, you run your budget, I'll run mine, but we'll hold each other accountable. It's also important that you find a coach to help talk you through that. And that's where the advisor comes into play. The partner program, ultimately speaking, especially when it's with a spouse, the two of you being involved together, there are going to be compromises that will be made to the plan because we're ultimately going to have two different mindsets to our money. Hey, I don't spend a dime. I pinch pennies in everything that I do. You may be comfortable going out and buying those name brand products instead of the great value, and that's the difference to it, And
I've seen married couples that have been married for 50, 60 years, very happily married. They never consolidated their funds.
Yeah.
I mean, they have always kept things separate and it's worked for them.
Yeah.
I've seen other couples where the moment they got married, they said, this is what I made. This is what you made. We're each going to contribute a portion. It's kind of a blended approach. There's others where they keep it just, again, it doesn't matter who brought it in. This is what we made. There's different approaches that work. I think the key thing is having that conversation, being on the same page with what's going to work for you guys.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So let's not try and reinvent the wheel, but maybe we should look at, is there a way to improve and kind of revise?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that said, if you need any help, if you have questions around it, please feel free to reach out to our office. We're glad to talk to you. And then also with that in mind, go ahead and share this with somebody else. Forward it on to someone who you think would benefit from this. On behalf of myself, Jordan, I don't know if you want to chip in here, but on behalf of myself, Jordan, and the rest of the office here at Semmax, thank you so much for listening. We hope you have a wonderful day. And don't just take this and listen to it, but hopefully you take some action from it. So thanks. Take care.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Semmax Way. If you're not completely satisfied with your current financial advisor, give us a call for a second opinion. Please note that this podcast is intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. The content shared on the Semmax Way should not be considered as investment advice. It is always recommended to consult your licensed investment representative and a competent tax advisor respectively for your fiduciary needs and plans. No statement contained in the Semmax Way podcast or made by its producers, sponsors, host Matt Landon, or Semmax Financial Group is a recommendation. Semmax Financial Group and Matt Landon are not responsible or liable for investment value loss of any kind from any action taken based on information discussed in the Semmax Way podcast. Any opinions or viewpoints in this podcast are shared for information and entertainment purposes only and are not financial advice. We do encourage you to conduct further research and seek personalized advice for your specific financial circumstances. Full disclosure available at semmax.com/podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you tune in for future episodes of the Semmax Way.
I'd like to pause a minute and just express our gratitude to our podcast sponsors, Noble's Food and Pursuits. This renowned restaurant group has been serving the community for an impressive 40 years, starting with Jim Noble's original restaurant, J. Basil Noble in High Point. Over the years, their passion for hospitality has flourished, leading them to expand into a diverse collection of 9 restaurants, a retail bakery, and a catering company. Today, we want to shine a spotlight on one of their beloved establishments, Rooster's, a Noble Grill, which has been proudly open for 31 years right here in Winston-Salem. Now, Rooster's is known for its commitment to offering a seasonally inspired, regionally cultivated menu featuring mouth-watering wood-fired meats, poultry, and vegetables. If you're looking for a delightful dining experience, they also host monthly wine dinners and provide live music on their inviting patio every Tuesday night. Now, make sure to pay them a visit at 380 Knollwood Street, and to secure your spot, head over to theroosterskitchen.com and make a reservation. Again, that's roosterskitchen.com.